Both popes have spoken this more forcefully with symbols and actions than with words. I was a student in Rome back in 1987 and witnessed a very historical event which unfortunately did not get much coverage in the media. Pope John Paul had invited the then ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople, Bartholomew, to Rome to sort of co-preside at a liturgy on that year, December the 6th, the feast of St. Nicholas, and both of our calendars fell on a Sunday, a very significant saint in the Eastern, especially Byzantine tradition. The two literally co-presided during the liturgy of the Word at Mass in St. Peter's at the high altar. At the liturgy of the Eucharist, the ecumenical patriarch was given a privileged place on the side at a throne. And after the liturgy, the two ascended to the loggia, that big balcony on the facade of St. Peter's, that normally the Pope only goes there on 3 occasions: when he's elected, and at Christmas, and at Easter, to give his Urbi et Orbi blessing to the city of Rome and to the world. Well, the two of them appeared on that loggia together to address the people gathered there. This was a very historical event. Pope Benedict XVI, as well, as continued in this line. Early in his pontificate, he visited the ecumenical patriarch. He had the ecumenical patriarch play a leading role in the Pauline year celebrations in Rome, and invited him back again to address the latest Synod of Bishops in the Sistine Chapel. So here we have the ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople seated in the Sistine Chapel, where popes are elected, addressing a synod of Catholic bishops. This received some very positive reverberations in the Orthodox community. Progress is also being made with the Russian Orthodox Church. They tend to be the most intransigent when it comes to ecumenical dialogue and activity. But we're seeing overtures, especially beginning with the Patriarch Alexei II, who recently passed away, and now with the election of the new Patriarch of Moscow, Kirill. But words are not lacking to make this point either. In his encyclical letter on the Church's commitment to ecumenism, Unum Sint, Pope John Paul II reflected that, and this is noted in your handout, that his proclamation of St. Cyril and Methodius as co-patrons of Europe, along with St. Benedict, the founder of monasticism in the Western world, who was proclaimed the patron of Europe by Pope Paul VI, he said this was aimed at helping Europe discover its spiritual roots. And he references the generous commitment with which the churches of the East have lived the monastic life, and how this served as a major force for spreading the gospel throughout history. He is picking up here on an important theme enunciated at the Second Vatican Council in its decree on ecumenism, which speaks about the flowering of monasticism beginning in the East and then providing a source from which Latin monastic life took its rise and has often drawn fresh vigor ever since. This is a critical point that we in the West can easily overlook and not even avert to. It is monasticism that animates the Orthodox churches still. Not only do their bishops largely come from the monasteries, but monasticism to a large extent provides the moral authority needed to give direction to the life of the church. That is why I was so heartened and even thrilled when I heard of the idea of the Anastasis dialogue, a spiritual ecumenical dialogue among monks of the Eastern Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. This idea is simply brilliant. It is exactly where dialogue with the Orthodox needs to take place, much more than between professors of theology or even between bishops. Moreover, Holy Resurrection Monastery is going about this in exactly the right way. By their daily life, discipline, liturgy, customs, in every way, to look just like a Greek Orthodox monastery, but one in union with Rome. This responds to the call of Pope John Paul II to the Eastern Catholic churches, as you see on your handout as well, to play a constructive role in the dialogue of love and in the theological dialogue at both the local and international levels, and thus contribute to mutual understanding and the continuing pursuit of full unity. This was a call already enunciated at the Second Vatican Council, which asserted that the Eastern Catholic churches have a special duty of fostering unity between the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox churches. Sadly, until relatively recently, the Eastern Catholic churches have often felt that to prove their loyalty to Rome, they had to adopt Latin Rite customs and usages in their church life, especially with regard to governance and most especially liturgy. This so-called Latinization of the Eastern Catholic churches has, not surprisingly, been looked upon with disdain by the Orthodox, and it has given rise to cause for suspicion on their part. Despite the ecumenical thrust of our church over the past 4 decades, this idea still kind of lingers around, less so than perhaps in years ago, but it's still around. And it can become, to be frank, an embarrassment for us when it comes to dealing with the Orthodox. Indeed, the Eastern Rite priests and seminarians that I studied with in their more cynical moments, and they did have them once in a while, they would lament that their church serves not so much as a door to unity with the Orthodox as a doormat. Thankfully, beginning with the Council and reiterated by Pope John Paul II in Orientale Lumen, our church has urged a return of the Eastern Catholic churches to their pure traditions. The authentic Eastern monastic life of Holy Resurrection provides a convincing sign that we are serious about this, and that our stated esteem for our Eastern counterparts is not mere lip service, but genuine. Holy Resurrection proves that, yes, it is possible to be both truly Eastern and faithfully Catholic at the same time. That union with Rome does not harm identity and purity of Eastern tradition, but enriches the whole church. Enriches the whole church. This points to another brilliant vision of these monks regarding their purpose and the contribution they have to make to the entire church. If a lot of what you're hearing and experiencing today is new or serving as an introduction to, or even if it is just deepening your understanding of the Christian East and its traditions, then the second mission of Holy Resurrection Monastery is perfectly demonstrated: to afford Latin Rite Catholics, the vast majority of us, the opportunity to know and appreciate, as Pope John Paul would put it, the other lung of the church, and thus assist us in our own authentic renewal, especially liturgical renewal. This vision, too, was enunciated at the Second Vatican Council, which stated in its decree on ecumenism: from their very origins, the churches of the East have had a treasury from which the Church of the West has drawn largely for its liturgy, spiritual tradition, and jurisprudence. I need to point out here that at this vantage point of 40 years after the Council, I believe anyway that we Catholics are now beginning a sort of assessment of what has transpired all this time. Just looking out there, I guess not all of you, but I think many of you, like me, can remember what those years were like immediately following the Council, and all of the upheaval that took place in really every aspect of the Church's life. No aspect, though, was more affected or as dramatically affected as that of the liturgy. This is indicative of a certain interpretation of the Council, which saw the Council as doing away with the old to make room for the new. It was doing something new, but in the sense of displacing the old, not further developing it in an organic way. This is what the then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger referred to as the hermeneutic of rupture. In the publication of his memoirs, Milestones, he writes, "The second great event at the beginning of my years in Regensburg was the publication of the Missal of Paul VI, which was accompanied by the almost total prohibition of using the Missal we had had until then. The prohibition of the Missal that was now decreed, a Missal that had known continuous growth over the centuries, starting with the sacramentaries of the ancient church, introduced," this is a key phrase, "a breach into the history of the liturgy whose consequences could only be tragic. A renewal of liturgical awareness, a liturgical reconciliation that again recognizes the unity of the history of the liturgy and that understands Vatican II not as a breach, but as a stage of development. These things are urgently needed for the life of the Church. I am convinced that the crisis in the Church that we are experiencing is to a large extent due to the disintegration of the liturgy. This is why we need a new liturgical movement, which will call to life the real heritage of the Second Vatican Council."